offshoots of Bubbly Dynamics, which you referred to, is the plant, a research and production facility comprising a collaborative community of small food businesses. And one of the things the plant does is closing loops of waste and energy for food producing businesses. Smart. Other things I know about John is that he is careful about where he spends his money and prefers locally. He's from Chicago. He's lived all over the city and has been commuting on his bicycle almost every workday since 1986. I almost said 1886. No,
not that old.
1986. But still, that is 35 years of not putting carbon into the air on those days and not extracting petroleum from the ground. I mean, that is remarkable.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
All right.
All right, that is my short introduction. And now what I'd like is to allow each person to introduce themselves. Starting off, let me see if I'm in order of my cue cards. I think I am. I would like you to start with filling out the rest of this sentence. And it's something that comes from Robin Wall Kimmerer, who wrote Braiding Sweetgrass, which I totally recommend. She's a botanist and a poet. The sentence is, I was raised by, and then you fill in whatever makes sense to you, and then let that lead you into your current work and your thoughts about the earth. I am going to ask that we keep that, 5 minutes max, even though you're very wise and I'm sure there's much more going on with you than 5 minutes. My very short example of filling in the sentence would be to say, I was raised by the smell of water and seasonal changes on the wind in the high arid plains of Wyoming. And that sounds romantic, but there's nothing romantic about the wind in Wyoming. But it has shaped me. Yeah, Selma, it is devastating, much more than Chicago. So, Trish, would you be open to answering that first? I was raised by?
I was raised by the environmental movement of the 60s and 70s. I thought that's how the world was. And I think that, well, maybe the best example that I can give is I wrote a book, or a report on a book called The Coming Age of Solar Energy. The book was written, and I actually I looked it up so I could remember. The book was written in 1973, and I must have read it the first year it came out, so I was 10. And I thought, I've been kind of waiting since. Wow, the age of solar energy is coming, and I really think that we're almost there. It's too late for a lot of things, but I think we can't focus on what we've lost. I think we have to focus on what we still have to come. But to further, I was thinking, if I'm going to be thinking about the past and what shaped me, it's just that was an era where Silent Spring, Rachel Carlson was writing Silent Spring, and the Clean Air Act was passed in, I was surprised at this. Clean Air was passed in 1964. Clean Water wasn't passed until 1972. But to put that all together, it's just that I think that we have to have a mindset. I was fortunate enough to have been exposed to all of that. Earth Day was started when I was a child. And I had two older sisters who were quite a bit older. And so very, teenager, young adult people interested in the movement at the time. And I feel like I've been fortunate enough to have that shape my life from the beginning. And it's influenced my work. And you're right, 5 minutes is going to be short. I thought it was going to be long, but I think what it's done is that I've tried in my private practice. So I mainly do residential. I'm an architect and primarily work by myself, solo practitioner, sometimes have interns. And in my practice, it's a question of selling it to people, saying, I would like you to spend money on solar panels, or I would like you to incorporate this into the design. And that has become easier and easier over time, including that I just finished what I think is the absolute first new construction home with a Tesla solar shingle roof on it in Annapolis, Maryland. And my client has been in it for a year and has no utility bills. It heats, it cools, it runs everything in the house. And they get a check for $5,000 a year back from the utility company. So that's like the culmination of an enormous dream for me. But all along, while I was trying to sell these things to private clients, I've been entering competitions. And I think that's what brought me to Patrice's attention. And so I can go back in time, but I think I'll start with the most recent, is a project called Skywater. That I designed for the Land Art Generator Initiative competition, which has been held in a variety of cities over the years. But this year was held on Fly Ranch in Nevada, which is a property owned by the Burning Man organization. And that project that Nate is kindly putting up on the share screen, I really loved what you said, Patrice, about honoring the land. And that's what I've chose to do when I made this entry to the competition, I'd had the idea for Skywater, which is a device that extracts moisture from the air, and moisture, even on the dry plains of Wyoming and other places, there's always moisture in the air. And it extracts it, purifies it, and then it's there available, free drinking water all the time. And this is run on solar power, so it can be planted anywhere and be creating drinking water. Not the kind of, like, you're not going to take a shower or run a big bath, but when you're out in the wilderness, you could have a life-saving drink of water from this. And so I chose, when presenting it, to tell the story of a young Paiute woman, because the Paiute tribe is who is native on the land in Nevada, where this is located, where the Fly Ranch is located. And the story of her walking there surrounded by water, but it's not potable water. And here's a device and she can go towards it. And so I even contacted someone there to get a translation into the Paiute language, and I won't even attempt a pronunciation of what Skywater means, or how to say it in Paiute. But I think it's important that we look at things that don't take it all. There are underground springs, there's an aquifer there. We could take water from the land, or we can create things that let us live much more lightly on it. And that's my philosophy all through.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. John, how would you answer that question? Or how would you finish it? I was raised by.
Well, I would say that I was raised by Depression era parents who didn't have a lot of money when they were growing up or later in life. And they were obsessed with getting the maximum usage out of absolutely everything. And so nothing went to waste. And it was very much a different era before people even thought about recycling, really. Some people did, but not many. And so I think part of that is the economic necessity of making sure that what you have can last. And that teaches you a lot. And, it isn't just about residential things. When you get into larger scale projects, as we look around, we see that we are surrounded by waste, enormous quantities of waste everywhere, in food, in manufacturing, everywhere. There's just mountains and mountains that are the byproducts of everything that we do, even of transportation, of everything. So that obviously is not something we can continue to do. We have to figure out how not to produce waste. If we're going to feed 8 billion people on this planet, for instance, there's just no way. So as we look around, we can find endless examples. And in the case of the plant, we're not looking to recycle 100% of a business's waste. We've got about 20 food producing companies inside of the building right now. And though, you know, we're looking to reuse, in some cases, maybe 5%, you know, whatever it is, if you can cycle that back in. And, you know, this is in the circular economy, or in, you know, when we're closing loops, what we're trying to do is take the output of one process and make it the input of another process. And that process can be just about anything. I mean, it can be waste heat. So carbon dioxide, grains, cardboard, wastewater. There are any number of different things that can be taken and reused and recycled within the building. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create economies of scale for small businesses so that they can compete against big businesses, which is very difficult, especially in the world of food production. Food, locally grown, locally manufactured food is more expensive, but the people doing it and making it are not making more money. You know, it's very difficult to compete against the kind of scale of Kraft Foods or any of those companies. And so whatever we can do to join these companies, to co-locate them so that various waste products can be used by others, is going to make an enormous difference and make that company more economically viable. So the way we do this is by starting with formerly vacant and derelict industrial properties. We're actually doing our third building right now. But in the case of Bubbly, the first one, we started with a building that was a motorcycle junkyard that had no roof. The whole courses of brick peeling away from the outsides. It was heated with burn barrels. All the mechanical systems and copper had been long ago stolen and the windows smashed out. But there was still a great deal of embodied energy in the concrete and in the structure itself. And so you can bring back a structure. You know, we look for what it can do best. In the case of the plant, it was a former pork packing facility built in 1925, most of it. And it has pitched floors with tremendously heavy floor loadings. It has beautiful brick surfaces, floor drains. And so the one thing it's very, very good at is food production. You know, it was very good at pork smoking previously, but now it's good at all kinds of other types of food production: coffee roasting, chocolate making, bread baking, kombucha brewing, you name it. There's all manner of, and indoor growing. Actually, we have 5 indoor farms, as well as some outdoor ones. So if you play to the strengths of the structure and what it's good at, you can save an enormous amount of money in developing the space. And so one of the goals here is to be able to provide inexpensive, below market food production space where we hopefully are handling the engineering side basically, and allowing a food business to focus on what it does best, making the food. And so the more the merrier, the more people we can have in there starting small businesses, the better. In some cases, well, closed loop farms, for instance, started in the basement in an area about 12 feet by 12 feet for $50 a month, including utilities. And they grew and grew and grew, and all through the pandemic have employed something like 14 people, occupying now, I don't know, something like 4,500 square feet inside, and then with outdoor farming space as well, doing edible flowers and other vegetables. And so you have to look and see, does somebody have good ideas? Are they going to do good things? Do they have good intentions? You know, and so the tenants at the plant, generally speaking, are very much self-selecting. They are people who are interested in the mission and want to be located in a place that is definitely non-standard and definitely focused on energy waste, you know, all of these things that are so important to us. So then you get collateral benefits as well. Job creation. We have about 100 jobs right now at the plant. And so this was a building that had been given up for dead. When I bought it in 2010, the broker described it as a strip and rip, meaning you strip the stainless steel and the copper out and you rip it down. And that was the perceived value of the structure. And so again, you got to see, what's there, what can it do, what do we have to add to it, how are we going to make it function again for the community? So
Yeah.
I could go on, but anyway, that's.
And I just want to point out that the picture we showed, that was the before on the bubbly, right?
That's the before in what's now Weiner Beer Company.
Oh,
So that's in the main brew house. There's also a tap room, a cooler, barrel house. And that is interior demolition and preparing to pour a new floor with trench drains and so prepping the space for food production. And then the photo of the small child looking through a glass hole in the floor. That's a former smokehouse vent in our winter garden, which was formerly an outdoor space that we enclosed and have citrus growing in there, among other things. Looking down through a former bank teller window that's about 1.5 inches thick of laminated tempered glass that we salvaged from literally from a bank. It used to have an FDIC sticker on it, as a matter of fact. And looking down at the plants growing below on the roofs, on the tops of the smokehouse restrooms, which are the ends of stainless steel smokehouses. We cut them off and turned them into a bunch of restrooms downstairs and kept alive some of the hardware from the meat packing plant so that people could see it.
nice. And I just have to say, I've been to the plant several years ago, and it is vibrant and fun.
Thanks.
And I'd never walked in a space like that before, with so many uses. It was so thoughtful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Which brings us to you, Selma. How would you answer that? Yeah, absolutely. How would you finish that thought?
I was raised by a mom who loved me, a community that enveloped me, and a family that has always had my back. And thinking about just the people in my life that helped bring me to where I am, it's one of the reasons why I do the work that I do, because without people ahead of you to tell you and lead you in the right direction, a lot of us would be lost. And so I got here working for Gardeneers, or at least as CEO. I started as a garden educator. And before that, I actually worked for the Chicago Park District. And that's where my love for youth development came in my life. I realized if I truly wanted to make an impact on this world, I could do what I wanted to do. But if I wanted to pass that message and I wanted it to go further, I would have to tap into the youth, because they're like sponges, like literally. And having gone to the Park District, I learned there my love for outside recreation, youth development. I saw when I started up north at Loyola Park, because I was born and raised in Rogers Park. And nice. I graduated from field school, like class of 2000, right? And so moving from Rogers Park to Grand Crossing in 2007, I noticed there was like a stark difference in neighborhoods, even though it was the same city. And after some investigating and some riding my bike, right, just for a little bit, just to get a grip on where is everything, I noticed that we didn't have access to like food like we used to where I grew up. When I grew up on London Ashland, and I could walk to at least 3 grocery stores in less than 10 minutes. And that's how I just thought everything was. Like, okay, we can go to Mercado, we can go to that Mercado, we can go to Dominick's, we can go to the Jewels. And then I moved to Southside, and I was like, oh, whoa. So the one store we have closes at 8. And what about the other ones? Oh, we have to go far. And so that's when I knew I had to pivot. And that's when I got into this food work, because I've always loved science. And I always loved working outside. I knew I couldn't be inside of a wet lab. I really tried. I worked for like the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, and I started nodding off. And I was like, oh, we gotta get back outside. And from that youth development, love of science, wanted to be outside. Once I came back to Chicago, because I went to Iowa State, majored in agronomy, minored in horticulture and Spanish, because you should speak Spanish if you work in agriculture. It's something to pick up, know enough to be dangerous at least, right? When I came back home, I wanted to figure out a way. One, I didn't want to farm in Iowa. Two, I wanted to figure out how I could bring my knowledge and expertise back to the city of Chicago and make it work not only for me to pay my bills, but have an impact on the world. And through working with, of course, in the for-profit sector, I realized that wasn't for me. I was able to have an opportunity to work for, at the time, Growing Power Chicago. And that's where I got my start. I was there with them during that transition when they became Urban Growers Collective. And while with Urban Growers Collective, I got introduced to Gardeneers. And so believe it or not, I applied to be an AmeriCorps service member and was offered a garden educator role, then moved up to farm manager because of my background. And after years of just being here and trying to get the mission out, I'm now CEO and head grower. And right. And I love this work. I love that the youth in our neighborhoods they have watched me grow, and as I have watched them grow, as we have all watched our food grow over the various growing seasons. And it's because of the folks that envelop me and love me and have my back that I'm able to envelop and love and have the backs of others through the work of food. That's my story.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
No problem.
Can we play?
Yes.
We're going to play a video. It's just the first minute and a half of the video that's on the Gardeneers home page. It's just, the visual is so important, I think.
Is my audio not going through? Are you hearing it?
We're hearing it. Not really. Can we start again? Because it's so beautiful. I don't want it to be less beautiful than it is.
Yes, my apologies. I don't know how that.
Hey, this is our first year as a festival, and we thought we'd be in person. So we're putting one foot in front of the other and doing our best.
I have to stop this first. My apologies.
While he's fixing that, I have to say that I live in Rogers Park too, so I know that corner. It was changed, but I know it.
It looks beautiful. Mostly everything is growing tall. I feel happy because you get to release all that stress.
Since 2014, Gardeneers has been growing school gardens throughout Chicago. The program was created to provide more equitable access to healthy food and food education for students throughout the city. School gardens are a living laboratory where students are active participants in their learning.
I have been working at Gardeneers for 1 year.
I've been gardening for almost 4 years. Gardeneers taught us transplanting, weeding, harvesting.
I planted a red onion. We planted tomatoes and potatoes.
We planted apple, spinach, carrots, and cucumbers.
And then we eat it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, we eat it. I love that. That's my favorite part of the video. She's adorable.
I'm glad we left it in. And I love the fact that they have such different, she's worked a year, he's worked 4. And it's just so interesting to see that resonate in their bodies.
It is awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for telling us about yourselves. I asked each of you to give me a question to ask everyone on the panel. So I'm going to start with those, and we'll see how, freewheeling it is or not. I'm going to start with John's question. Woo! It was, how can your own areas of expertise contribute to a larger strategy on climate change? It was a big one. How can your own areas of expertise contribute to a larger strategy on climate change? John, do you want to go first?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, I think the local piece is very important. And so I actually have an art degree. I have an MFA in industrial design, which is essentially product design, although I was never a product designer. I worked in video games. I art directed video games, and I worked in television. So completely unrelated and mostly unproductive activities. And then on the side, I always had an interest in industrial history and in factories in particular. And so I've been a student of factories since I was a kid. I've just always been fascinated by them. And so I think that as kind of an amateur engineer and architect, I'm not a real either one of those. Again, I have an art degree, but I think that you have to know a little bit about everything, and it's good to take what you do know and see how it can mix together, and then bring in the people that really know what they're doing. Bring in the actual architects, bring in the actual engineers, bring in the actual artists for that matter, and farmers and chefs and everybody else, and find out what they know and get everybody together in one room essentially. And so, I think, we try very much to contribute to working on the climate change problem by teaching, by setting an example, creating a replicable example, particularly. And so saying, all right, this is what we're doing. We don't really have any money, but we have a lot of creativity and we have a lot of excited and interested people, and they all bring some kind of skill to it. Everybody does. And so I think that's the biggest contribution, is gathering the people who have the energy and the desire to see some change and getting them all to work on their little piece of it and work towards a common goal.
Yeah, thank you. I imagine that if something like The Plant could be in every neighborhood, however you want to define that,
Sure.
In Chicago, that would make a huge difference.
Oh yeah, everywhere.
You have, what, 50 wards, 50 The Plants? That's a good goal.
I'm so tired. Okay.
Do it all the time. Someone will pick it up too, perhaps.
Good.
Yeah, thank you. Selma, Trish, which of you would like to answer that next? I'll say it again. How can your own areas of expertise contribute to a larger strategy on climate change?
You go ahead, Selma, if you want.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Trish. I think our area of expertise can tackle climate change by, like Trish said earlier, there needs to be a mindset change. And so what we do is in agriculture, at least while working for Gardeneers, and a lot of other orgs are as well, we're activating our youth, right? Our youth are, I hate to say it, and this is one thing I do love. I'll date myself. I've been working in youth development for about 17 years. A lot of people discount youth until there's something bad to say to them. Wow. They have that old phrase, children should be seen and not heard. It's like, by the time they're heard, it's too late. It's too late. So by activating our youth, getting them interested in environmental careers and knowing and understanding what equitable, healthy food access is, knowing that there are plenty of careers and ways that we can help save and steward our planet for future generations. That's how we in this area can. We have to tap into generations that we can change their minds, or at least show them a better way.
Yeah, fantastic. How many gardens does Gardeneers, how many school gardens does Gardeneers work with? Currently 19. We are working with 19 schools and around 18 sites. Yeah, thank you. Trish, what's your response?
I think it ties in with what I was saying about, like, I have my work, and unlike John, I am an architect, but my interest has always been the solar, the plants, the green things that you used to talk about, and people would sort of look at you sideways and think like, well, you seemed kind of normal until now, and you're obviously not. And now it's just so encouraging. You can have this discussion. We're here at this festival. You can get on a plane and be sitting next to a, VP at a Fortune 500 company. You can start talking about green stuff, and they're in it. They're on it. Things are starting to change, and so I feel like I've been keeping my hand in all these years, and had the really gratifying experience this year of having an idea that I've been thinking about for about 5 years. And it's not something I invented. It's one of those things where you think, wow, what a cool idea. And then you Google it, and you find out other people have done it. But it was to have community geothermal. And it came to me because I was in a neighborhood where my office is that we were turning into a historic district. And we were bringing the neighborhood together to get support for saving a building that I ended up buying to save it because the developer had the demo permit. So that ended up being the only real solution in that instance. But there's a lot of fear about being landmarked, that it will cost you more money, people will be telling you what to do. And so I started thinking about ways that could be offset, and was very interested in geothermal. But in the city, geothermal is either undoable because you don't have the space, big enough lot to do the shallow kind, or too expensive because to drill the deep wells to get enough room for the loops is pricey. So I thought, well, what if we ripped up the alley and we buried geothermal lines there, and then we had people subscribe to it? Well, it turns out there's a town in Iowa called West Union, Iowa, where they did that with their town square, and all of the businesses around the square pay very minimal utility bills because they tap into community geothermal. And I've been told geothermal is not exactly the right term for it, that it's geothermal means kind of like you've discovered a hot spring in your yard, but that technically it's called geoexchange. And that is that you're taking advantage of the fact that once you get down, 4 feet or so anywhere on the planet, the temperature is constant at about 55 degrees. So you use that heat, which doesn't sound warm, but it's a lot warmer than trying to warm up a Chicago day to 72 degrees and heat your house. You start at 55 and go to 72 or 68 or wherever you're doing. Should be 68. So anyway, I had that idea, and I had been playing with it for a long time. And then I started working this year on a project to move a theater company to North Lawndale. And we're creating a campus there. And it turns out that the campus is in the K-Town Historic District, which isn't a city district, but it's a National Historic Register district. And so I'm proposed that we would do community geothermal and allow the people in the historic district that we would host it at the theater. We'd have a pumping station and we'd be the first ones in, but then everybody could sign up and we could have this loop. And the really cool thing was that I thought, okay, this is a heavy lift, right? It's ComEd, it's the city, it's the whole thing. And about a month ago, I opened up Crane Chicago Business, and there's Alderman Brendan Riley, who happens to be my alderman, talking with the co-authoring an op-ed with the guy who runs the Citizens Utility Board, whose name I'm not going to remember. And the title of it was Chicago Needs Community Geothermal. So I have a meeting scheduled with the alderman in 2 weeks to talk about this. And I've talked about with Alderman Scott where their project is, and he's enthusiastic, and this might even really happen. So that I feel I'm using my expertise and my love of this to maybe make something happen.
Yeah. Well, we have lots of streets and we have lots of alleys in Chicago. Yeah. That's brilliant.
Thanks. And I see that it's getting darker and darker. I think I'm going to start using up some electricity. So I'm going to turn on the light. You'll excuse me. So.
For a good cause. It's for a good cause. Well, while Trish is turning on her lights, I will take advantage of this. She had a few questions. So let's start with, if you could change one thing about Chicago, what would it be? Trish, since you propose it, do you want to handle it?
Well, I see everybody else go.
It's a big one, right?
Well, it came out of a competition actually, that the Chicago Architecture Club had about 20, maybe even 25 years ago. If you could change one thing, and they asked architects to do that, and they had an exhibit. And I think I would go with what I went with then. I made just a simple board, and I showed Lake Michigan, and I showed Chicago, and I mounted a little pinwheel on the board in the lake, and I put a cup with a bunch of straws in it. This is obviously pre-COVID, because people were to take the straw and unwrap it and blow on the pinwheel. And the answer was, I would put wind turbines in Lake Michigan with all the safety guarding for migratory birds and all, all the things that we need to do to make that work. And I would eliminate ComEd. So that was my answer.
Make no small plans. I like that. Yeah, I mean, it's windier out there, isn't it?
Well, it's unobstructed, and I'm fortunate enough to have a little apartment that's filled with books looking out on the lake, and I think it would be beautiful. I think it would be just gorgeous to be looking out there. I mean, the lake is beautiful on its own, but to think that it was out there and we were taking advantage of nature to run the things that we want to have, it would be even more beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. What about who wants to speak next?
Well, aside from the lack of hills here, which I think might be a little bit of a heavier lift to add mountains in Chicago, so I might abandon that one. But slightly more attainable things would be if we could stop tearing down all the buildings constantly, and perfectly good housing stock throughout, especially well, every side of the city, where we're losing it sometimes because it's vacant but still perfectly solid and could be renovated, and we could create lots of jobs. Renovating solid housing stock, that would be a big change, because what we want in a city is we want density. We want people to live here because things are more efficient the more people that use them. All utilities are more efficient. It's easier to heat a building that has more people in it, for instance. Food, transportation, all of these things become more efficient the denser we are. I mean, that's the whole thing about cities. That's why they're efficient, because there's lots of us here. And so if we could stop doing that, and we could stop compartmentalizing things. And so by that, I mean, to create a walkable city, you have to have jobs, you have to have services, all where people live. And so there's ways to do that. And, I'm not talking about making steel in the middle of a neighborhood necessarily, but there are so many industries that could take place in the middle of a neighborhood and create good jobs. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. Selma, what's your response?
I would change how funding is distributed. I think a lot of funding that comes to Chicago, and especially a lot of taxpayer dollars, they're not distributed equitably. There's so many things we should have that we do not. And there are so many things that we are paying for that we could cut back on. And so if I could change Chicago, I would change how we allocate resources.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. I could go a little further if I wanted to, because I'm not afraid of being political, but yeah, equitable social services, not so much police. I'll just leave that there. Another question from Trish. What environmental myth would you like to dispel?
You want me to go while they think? It's only fair. It feels like the person who asked it should
Sure.
answer first and give the other people a chance. And I was going to say, and Patrice taught me a new addition to this. We've been told forever to recycle, right? And I think we forget that the phrase is reduce, reuse, recycle. And Patrice taught me that it's refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle. And so the myth that I would like to dispel is that recycling is somehow some badge of honor, because this is putting it out there. I think by the time you get to recycle, you've really, really screwed things up. That's the, besides just flinging it out the car window, recycling is not what you should be aiming for. It's one step above that, but throwing out the window. But reducing, refusing, I think reduce and refuse maybe fall into the same category. And reusing, John, it really spoke to me when you said you had parents who grew up in the Depression. So were mine. My parents were born in the mid-20s. And that idea that you just reused, you didn't waste, that's really integral. So that's the myth that I would like to dispel, that recycling is, it's just the lowest rung on the ladder, and we need to do way better.
Thank you. I agree. I would throw out there the biggest environmental myth that I'd like to dispel is that driving a hybrid or an electric car somehow gets you your points for being environmentally conscious. The amount of space in the city that private automobiles, even electric ones, take is really detrimental to the fabric of a city. And when people are on transit and when they are walking, they are interacting and they're seeing each other and they're communicating and they're smiling, they're shouting, they're whatever, but they're interacting with each other. And that's a much safer city than when people are in little boxes. And so, hey, that's great if you're saving some gasoline and some pollution, but the larger problem that's created by that car is a much bigger problem than the fuel that's been saved.
Wow. Yeah, that's food for thought and action. Selma, what are you thinking?
I say this with all due respect, Meatless Mondays. Meatless Mondays can go. And I say that because I understand the concept behind it. Yes, bovine gas does contribute to greenhouse gases. However, the meat is already produced. It is our agrarian lifestyle here in the United States of America that is truly the problem, right? And so I know we have a lot of people that are like, if we just decrease our meat intake by 1 day, well, that's awesome. But now that meat is going to become a part of shrinkage, and shrinkage is food that can't be sold, whether it went bad or it was stolen. So it was still produced. That cow was still raised, it was still fed, it still got to belch, it was still slaughtered, it was still distributed, it was still sold to a store. You just didn't buy that particular packet, it's still gonna go into the trash.
Wow.
Nothing has changed. Add to that, when we increase, or at least when we don't increase our vegetative diets in a sustainable and healthy way, we actually have negative impacts on other sectors. So for instance, I don't care too much for almond milk. I don't like the taste, but I'm not knocking you if you do, right? It's how almonds are produced. And so the overexploitation of our bees, right? So now we're sacrificing bees for a demographics diet. Right.
And the
it's like,
water, the incredible
oh, don't
amount
get
of water.
the water.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
gonna go there, right? And the fact
Sorry.
that water is no, don't be sorry, because you know, and water is now becoming the new oil. There are so many things that's linked to, oh, if we just stop eating meat. So that's my myth. And I try not to get on that soapbox because I don't want people to think I'm attacking them. But just let's think about how we're deciding to change how we eat.
Yeah. Yeah. I would encourage you to talk about that as much as you want to. Certainly with me, there are a lot of people who, including myself, who need education, right? Who are going on myths, and true education is not happening. And there's a lot of like, good for me going on, including by myself. It's true. So thank you. I think this might be our last question from you. When someone and I were talking about what would be a good question, I feel like I already said this. Did I? No. Okay. No. Okay. It is, do you know your farmer? And now I'm going to out myself. My answer is no. Trish, what's your answer?
Yes.
Oh, John, what's your answer?
Yes, emphatically. I know lots of them.
Yeah. Selma, do you want to tell us the thought behind this, the necessity behind this?
And so, yes, the question is, do you know your farmer, and where does your food come from, right? And that's because as we start thinking, John mentioned wheat, the thought is we need to be able to feed 8 billion people. I was told that when I was in school, when we hit 7 billion when I was at Iowa State. I remember the day we were in class and my professor made sure he announced it. And I was like, okay, when's the quiz? But, when we think about that, we need to start producing our food a lot closer to home. Now, the thing about producing food closer to home, again, John said, just because they're producing food closer to home, it may be a little more expensive, but they're not making more money. Our farmers are not making extra money because the food is closer. Again, they're competing with larger farms. We're losing a lot of the farms in the middle, like Iowa State, the Leopold Center, they wrote a paper about how we're losing farms that are in the middle. We have a lot of small farms, less than 25,000 in sales, and then we have a lot of larger farms. They're owned by they're family farms, but not in the sense that most of us know, right? There's a lot of crop sharers, or as we used to call them, sharecroppers, working these fields. They're owned by one family, worked by several. And because of that, a lot of people don't know who's growing their food. When we lose farmers in the middle, when we lose our local farmers, we lose a whole bunch of things. We lose the ability to get different types of foods, right? Everyone doesn't want to eat the same type of corn. Everyone doesn't want to eat the same type of peppers. We like options. Everyone likes options. Our middle farmers do that, but when we lose them, we lose options. They're our land stewards. They're the people that tell us about our food, and they can tell a story about the land, right? And there's so many things that you can learn from your local farmer, not just like, how should I cook this, or how long did it take to grow? By knowing your farmer, and local doesn't mean they have to be in your neighborhood. That's nice, that's dope. But Illinois, we are a part of the bread basket. We're the bread basket. There's so many farmers out there that want to get food to us, to folks that want to know them. And we should support them. We should support them because without them, we will still eat. Will it be as great? I'm not sure.
No, I think that's spot on, first off, but I also want to add that knowing your farmer is important, because the more you know about where your food comes, the more interested you're going to be in the quality and is it good for you, and what were the effects on the land from that food. And the more people that have that knowledge, the better everybody is going to be. So it's important to know your farmer.
So for the person who would say, how do I know my farmer? What might you say?
Well, you can go to, shop more locally, shop at the smaller stores. If you ask the guy at the big supermarket, they don't have any idea where it came from. I mean, some cases they do carry local produce, but not like a market does, not like a smaller market. And that's important, and to buy it from organizations that are as close as possible where you can meet those people. And I know it can be more expensive, but the more people have their own gardens and they get a little taste of how good that local pepper or tomato or whatever is, they're going to be encouraged to maybe even try it themselves.
So that would be my answer, and why I was so emphatic with, yes, I know my farmer, because my farm is on the roof of my office. And I'm in Old Town. I've got a section of roof in a condo association, and the neighbors have been kind enough to let it creep down, but I have like a nectarine tree in a box, and a green plum tree, and an espaliered apple tree. I have Concord grapes. I have raspberries and blueberries. I used to have an asparagus patch until I re-insulated the ceiling in my office and realized that by stopping the heat loss through the ceiling, I was condemning the asparagus to freeze the next winter. But I think that, what you're doing, Selma, is so amazing, that every kid should have the opportunity to know where their food comes from, because they did it themselves.
Yeah.
There is nothing better than that off the vine tomato, or the plant, watching the potato plant grow and grow and grow, and then, oh, it's time, and you pull it all up and there they are under the dirt. Those are the things that lead us then to go to the farmer's market, to go to, Whole Foods does a good job of saying local, or where things came from, but that's a lot more expensive. And that's, the real plus of growing in your backyard, is that the sun and the water and some help, and you don't pay anything at all.
But one thing I'd like to add is, even if you can't get to the farmer's market, or if Whole Foods is, I call it whole paycheck. I'm going to be honest.
No, I know.
But they have awesome brownies. Even if you can't find a way to the farmer's market or Whole Foods, lots of local farms have CSAs. So they have community supported agricultural programs. So you can, and that's one of the ways we support farmers, right? So if we think about farms, of course, it takes lots of work, but they take lots of money. By supporting through CSAs, you're actually investing. You get a share, and then you get to a return on your investment later on in the season. And that way a farmer knows, okay, this is how we can sustain ourselves. And we have people who are supporting us locally. And so that's just my thing.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and grow your own, but CSAs, local farms.
Yeah.
Know where your food comes from.
Just as one example, Ellis Farms, who I know through going to the farmer's market, has all winter long been running their own little deal. And if you get an email to Renee at Ellis Farms by midnight on Thursday night, on Saturday morning, over on Stockton by where the Green City Market is, and out in Oak Park, and I think one other location, you drive by and your bag is waiting for you, and you pay and you pick up. And it's way better than putting a mask on and going to the grocery store. And it's local, and you know them. And that's been really a really awesome offshoot of the COVID era. They wouldn't have done it, I don't think. And I maybe wouldn't have signed up for it. Although I've done CSAs, Angelic Organics from way back, Farmer John.
Oh yeah, I did that one.
Yeah.
And Patchwork and lots of others, Montalbano, lots of those. But the other thing about CSAs and local farmers is that money stays in the community. And especially if it's one of the inner city, or a farm that's in the city, the money that you spend stays right there, and then the people that make it spend it at the local businesses. And the more we do that, the healthier it is for our communities, and the better it is for the city.
You're here. I'm wondering, Nate, do we have questions from our attendees that you want to bring up?
we have not gone to asking for questions yet. So if,
Hey, y'all.
yeah,
Put a
you,
question in the Q&A if you have a question.
yeah. You had mentioned at the beginning to hold the questions being posted in case it was answered throughout. But if anyone attending and on the live stream on the YouTube as well has any questions, you can put those in now. What a miraculously great conversation. And really cool listening to you all. And I can start off with a selfish question first, if you'd like to go straight to it.
Sure.
I thank you so much for everything you guys have said. I'm glad I've been on mute because I've been like, yes, like super excited about the things you guys have been saying and learning so much. But I was just up in Minnesota to support the fight against Pipeline 3, the oil pipeline, and met farmers there who were involved in the fight. And they told me a lot about the pesticides expanding and the production of all of McDonald's potatoes come from the state. And the way that that's just like taking over a lot of the farming in the state. And it's always crazy to hear. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a documentary because it pulls the veil back from like Ronald McDonald. And like Thelma was saying about our meat consumption, like it's put behind such a facade until you hear that like they're preying on local farms and being backdoor defeated through the state channels that are meant to keep people safe in court. And they're like, oh, you work for us though. So I'd wonder whether Chicago or Illinois based, what that would mean to you to like take that like mask off of food, or maybe architecture in your case, Trish, what the like big interests are locally or statewide that are headaches, to put it lightly.
So Nate, you're asking for what is standing in the way? Who is
Yeah,
standing in the way?
what is the state of it as it is, and how does that operate? Are there big players behind that, or like what would you change about the way that we're doing it, and is it entrenched like that, defended for like in dirty ways?
I think someone wants to say something.
Okay. I want to be diplomatic about this. I don't want to use the word dirty, right? But there are larger systems. So Patrice and I were talking about the chickenization of our meat industry. So I mentioned the book that I had to read in agricultural sociology. It's called The Meat Racket. The prices went up substantially since I always tell people to read this book. It's on Amazon. I'm actually looking now. There's only like one hard copy left, but it's on Kindle. It's by Christopher Leonard. And it talks about how in years past, when meat was produced, the farmer bought the meat. They bought the animal. So they bought the chicken, or they bought the cow, and they bought the pig, and they raised that chicken, cow, or pig. They fed them. They loved them. They reared them. And then it was their job to they could either learn how to slaughter that animal themselves, or they would find someone to slaughter. That's what slaughterhouses were for. And then the slaughterhouse would, of course, do what they had to do. And then there was another entity that would package up the meat. And then there was another entity that would buy the meat, say like the distributor. And then there was another entity that would buy that meat from the distributor, say like a grocery store. And then you bought it. Well, a lot of our poultry companies have taken all of those people out and completely vertically integrated. So the farmer, especially when it comes to chicken, and in this particular book, they talk about Tyson's chicken. They're now known just as Tyson, but they've been Tyson's Chicken and Feed, Tyson's Chicken. Now they're just Tyson. And so it talks about how Tyson has completely vertically integrated. And you talked about McDonald's potatoes being made or produced in one particular state. In a lot of southern states, there are whole towns that are dependent upon the chicken and the meat that goes into Chicken McNuggets for McDonald's. And that's because Tyson owns the chickens, they own the feed, they own every part of that chain except for the loans that the farmers take out to house these birds that they are technically rented by Tyson's, right? And this isn't to make them seem bad. I don't want you to think, oh, she doesn't like Tyson's. No, this is capitalism. And how you feel about capitalism is up to you, right? So with this, with Tyson owning the chickens, they own the feed, they set the price, they do everything, again, except own the loans on the buildings that are used to raise these chickens by the farmers. There are a lot of ways that farmers in other sectors, say for instance, in hogs and in cows, are trying to prevent that from happening.
Wow.
Most people don't know that 1 out of every 5 pieces of chicken you eat come from a Tyson plant. There are 5 major brokers when it comes to meat in this country. Same for seeds.
Wow.
A lot of people don't know that 5 major companies own majority of the genetic material. So the intellectual property behind genetics on a lot of the seeds that we plant, right? A lot of people don't know this. And there are documentaries. People have been putting the information out for years. You know, some people just haven't been paying attention. Right now, the simplest version of this information I'm saying is Rotten on Netflix. They actually have a chicken episode. I make sure I show it to my teens because I did poultry. I was an undergraduate research assistant for Dr. Susan J. Lamont at Iowa State. And so I got to know chickens, and I learned that I don't like chickens. But it was from that I realized, like, hey, it isn't the farmer in the dale or old McDonald. That's what we think in Chicago. Oh yeah, no. No, it's larger companies, and they kind of have a labor force that are the American farmer now, but most folks don't know. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and I would play off what you're saying, Selma, as to when you say seeds, that again, not to say any one particular company is so much evil, although Monsanto could go a long way towards taking that title. But you know, they create the seed, and then they create the pesticide, and they have pesticide that won't kill their plant. And if you were to, even as in olden days, you would save the seed, right? A farmer would have your crop and you would save the seed, you would plant the next year. Monsanto will sue you if you do that because they own the seed. So you've got to come back. And so I just want to give a shout out to a guy named Wes Jackson, who runs a place called the Land Institute in Salina, Kansas. And I heard him come speak at the Renaissance Society on the University of Chicago campus, which is an art gallery that was the first place to show Picasso's work in the 1920s. But they had photographs taken on like factory farms and the monoculture of fields. And they invited Wes Jackson to speak, and I was enchanted because what he's been working on, he's halfway through what he envisions as a 50-year project. So it's over 25 years he's been working on this, is to take the plants that grew, that the native peoples grew, that were perennials. And then as we selected for larger seed and larger fruits and all the characteristics that we wanted, they became annuals. And he's working backwards and creating grains that have those big, beautiful seeds, but they're perennials. And they're deep rooted, so they don't require plowing, and the loss of land and the erosion and the dirt going into the Mississippi River, and they don't require the massive infusions of fertilizer. And he wants to make it so that you can plant a field, and then every year it just comes up and you harvest it. And he has a thing called Prairie Fest every fall, and I made it out there about 7 years ago now, and went to a barn dance and saw they have new grains that they've created. And I just think everybody should check that out. So the Land Institute, Wes Jackson, Kansas.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Sure.
John. Sorry to jump in if you had an answer there, but we did get 3 questions, and we're close to our end of time here. And these questions are each pretty large questions. So if we can manage to keep the answer is short. This first one especially I'm excited about, but the first one coming in from Nicholas, thank you, is given that the US has not really moved on solar energy for more than 30 years, in comparison with China, for instance, do each of you feel hopeful about this week's announcements from the Biden administration regarding emissions, et cetera? And John, since you were the next in line, I'll toss it to you.
Oh, sure. You know, hopeful a little bit, yeah, but you know, it's baby steps too. And I mean, we all know that it's vastly more than we've done in a long time, but it's still a fraction of what we need to do. And you know, I absolutely applaud the effort and the motion, but I think unfortunately things are probably going to get a whole lot worse before we see the kind of real commitment that's required. And I applaud what's going on, but boy, we got a long ways to go.
Here, here.
So-
Do either of you two ladies want to speak?
Just to say yes, I agree.
Yeah, I'm excited, but I'm optimistic, but I also like to wait for results because I'm a scientist.
Yeah, it's huge to have the words. Much more than we had a couple months ago, but it's words. Patrick has a question about what can I do to grow my own food if I live in an apartment with limited space?
Okay, I'll take this one. So limited space. There is an organization called Chicago Grows Food. I know that's real simple, but yeah, it's awesome. It was started through an initiative with the University of Illinois Health. I might be getting that wrong, but definitely University of Illinois Chicago, and they have some programs. But Chicago Grows Food, and so they have been able to establish themselves during the pandemic as an organization that gets out grow bags, and because their goal is to get everyone in Chicago to grow a little bit of their own food in there, or at least within the confines of their homes, including your back porch. And they have, they're in the process of making instructional videos, and they have been really instrumental in making sure a lot of youth have been able to grow at home and families have been able to grow at home on the South and West sides. That's one way. Also, yeah, I definitely would start with Chicago Grows Food. And then you can also Google other organizations that'll help you with that. But I would send you there first.
That's a great start. Thank you.
Yeah, I would also say community gardens, so that if you don't have room in your apartment and you can't get access to land, there are places where for a very minimal fee, typically people can join in a community where there's a vacant lot, people have little plots.
Or your roof, like yours.
Yeah, or your roof. And a very tolerant condo association.
Elizabeth has a greit question here and complements the conversation. She said that I certainly agree on the chicken factories and GMO, Selma. One thing that's on my mind this week to change about Chicago is to have safe, herbicide and pesticide-free outdoor spaces, especially around schools, homes, and in the parks and forest preserves. Do you have a perspective on how this could be encouraged?
That comes back to mindset change, right? And that's because when we think about what we love here in agriculture in the city is we like grass and we like trees. And we like that grass to be green. And we don't want anything else in it, including dandelions or crabgrass or wild violets. And it's like, that's kind of where they live. And so until people understand that everything that we have in our urban agriculture, minus agriculture, or minus the production agriculture, let me be more specific, is needed in order to sustain like just our ecosystem, yeah, it's going to be a long time coming. Now, the great thing is the city of Chicago, at least the Park District, because even when I used to work for the Park District before 2011, they had made a concerted effort to decrease the amount of post-emergent, or at least herbicides that attack dandelions specifically, because they know that dandelions are needed for one, water retention. When we reduce the plants that are in our lawn, that reduces the amount of water uptake. And then two, a lot of our pollinators, dandelions are their first source of like pollen and whatnot. And so by decreasing the amount of herbicides on that, one, they save money. And two, they help. They can't be I think they're the second largest urban park district system in the United States of America. You can't tout that fact and also like get rid of these plants that help our bees. You got to pick a side. And so it comes down to a mindset change. Here, I find you have to toss capitalism in there. You have to appeal to people's better interests, and that better interest is usually a wallet. Like, hey, if you don't spray as much, you can save this much money. Because as much as we want to say, oh, the environment's very important. It is, not to everyone. Because some people think I'm not going to be here in 50 years. What does it matter? But it's like you have people that you leave behind. So talk to their wallet. That's really what we have to do. Sometimes that's what I do. Some people don't want to hear about, oh, but the greater good. But how does that benefit me? You can save money if you don't spray. Mindset change.
Love it. Thank you. And I do think that that is a great idea for all of us to take out there if we haven't already, that if we're always talking to each other, you know, people who want to do something environmentally friendly, then we're not talking to the people who aren't. So yeah, mindset change, wallet. Thank you. I'm aware of the time, and I want to thank everybody for attending, and thank everybody who's attending on YouTube Live or who will watch the recording. And I especially want to thank you three amazing people. This was so wonderful to hear your ideas, to hear all your wisdom behind them, and to just hear your authentic voice. So John, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, Selma, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Trish, thank you. How can we go to the website, find out all about these people, find out about their work so you can support it. Also register for more events. We have, as I said, we have plenty coming up every day. I want to know from each of you how we can support you. And then I want to end by reading a poem. So how can we support you, Selma?
One, by visiting gardeneers.org and following us on all of our social media. And I have to do this, volunteers and donate, right? We can always use helping hands. And if you want to have more conversations like this, our staff they're just as awesome as I am. And they're willing to have these conversations. Just come on out to the garden and help donate.
Okay, will do. Thank you. John, how can we help you?
Sure. Same thing, insidetheplant.com. See what's going on, calendar of events. Come out to one of our events, you know, as the pandemic hopefully lifts. We're going to have a whole lot more. Right now, we're running Sunday farmers markets 11 to 3 with Vegan Paradise. The tap room is open. You can come to the plant and have a beer and some food. And we'll be opening the Packingtown Museum for reals this time, hopefully in the not too distant future. There's ways to get involved by volunteering, helping out with events, where there's a lot of science going on these days too. And, you know, it's good if you just think about where things come from. Stop spending money with big companies. That benefits all of us. So anyway.
Thank you. And we are going to the Vegan Farmers Market this Sunday, 2 days from now. And then we're going to there, and that's on our site. And you are also having a farm walk
right on
Friday from 3 to 5.
Next Friday, right? Come out and see
there, right?
New Magnolia and Patchwork and Closed Loop Farms, and some things inside the building will be going on as well. And it'll be a good time.
I'm looking forward to it. Trish, how can we support you?
Put a plant on your balcony. If I were to look up at all the buildings and there was a plant on every single balcony, or actually I'll put a shout out to a product too called an earth box that you put the water in and the plant soaks the water up from the bottom. And there's a little tarp over there. So you actually don't take advantage of the rain so much except on the leaves themselves. But if everybody had one of those, you'd be amazed at the food production you can get out of them. I have 25 of them on my roof as part of my farm. And that's how everybody could help me, is everybody put a plant on the balcony or in a community garden, or I don't know, carry it or make your car have a green roof.
I love it. Thank you. Will you indulge me to read a poem? Thank you.
Tell me.
Thank you. It's called Remember. It's by Joy Harjo, who is our US Poet Laureate. It goes like this. Remember the sky that you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon. Know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away to night. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father. He is your life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are. Red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember you are all people and all people are you. Remember you are this universe and this universe is you. Remember all is in motion, is growing, is you. Remember language comes from this. Remember the dance language is, that life is. Remember. And I think that's what we're doing. Thank you all so much. It's been delightful. I hope to see you again soon.
Same.
All right,
Nice meeting all of you.
great.
It was. Good conversation, y'all.
Yeah, thanks. Great.
All right. So Nate, I think we're saying good night. Yes?
Yes, thank you everyone for a wonderful event. Thank you to all of our audience members. At every inch matters. So thank you. Thank you all. Take care.